Hello and welcome to the show. So this week's FailRace versus the community was a state car or station wagon or whatever they might be called elsewhere racing. There isn't a huge variety of cars. It is primarily made up of Volvos and Audis with the odd Ford country boat, and the mini clubman countryman thing, horrible hideous thing, was allowed, but there were very few of them. Anyway, race number 1 is at Sebring. This is the club circuit, the shortest one. Oh, is it club circuit or is it? Oh, I can't remember the names of blooming tracks. Yes, this track has a very, very nasty first corner, which amazingly everybody got through fairly well. There is a little bit of bumping later on in the lap. I think one car got fired off into the first corner, into the first hairpin. There's a little bit of a crash in the background, which I can't show you very well because the replay cameras are terrible at that particular section of track. In fact, around this whole track it's very hard showing stuff with the replay cameras. They sort of focus very heavily on the car that it's selected. It doesn't really show a wider picture very well. Either way, I was driving the black and orange Volvo. Daniel actually turned up for the first race amazingly. You can see in the background he is driving the GoPro Audi RS2. Anyway, the first lap was relatively clean. I mean, considering the cars that we're driving, as the Ford gets very sideways in the background and Audi getting even more sideways. Yeah, this race was primarily made up of Audis. There were an awful lot of Audis in this one. There were a few Volvos. I think there was one Ford. No, there were two Fords. I lied. There were two Fords in this race. You can see them both there in the same shot. Yeah, the Audis did sort of dominate in this first. Well, I say dominated numbers. They didn't actually dominate the race. You can see I'm trying to work my way through the field. Now, these cars are all B class, and since the Volvos were fairly low PI, I think these are D class. The Fords were even lower, and the Audis were sort of mid B class to start with. There was lots of varying levels of upgrades, lots of different avenues you could take. You could go for handling, you could go for power. The Fords were the lowest PI to start with, which means you could do the most upgrades to them. However, the Ford did struggle, or the Fords, I should say, did struggle. This one here started fairly high up, but was gradually falling back through the field. Although he was putting up a fight, it wasn't making it easy for this Audi. I think the downside with the Ford, while you can do a lot to it, because of the PI, you've got lots of room to play around with the PI. Even if you put all the handling parts on it, you put race tyres, you put race suspension, race brakes, it's still a very big car. Even with race rate reduction, it's still very heavy. It's not the easiest thing in the world to drive. It's still fairly quick. You can see he's putting up a good old fight with this Audi, but it's always going to struggle. I was actually surprised about the number of Audis. I was thinking more people were going to go for the Volvos because you have more sort of room for upgrading, whereas the Audis already are. I think they're B440 or around that, so they're already mid B class, so you don't have a huge amount of room for upgrading them. But yeah, as you can see, the Ford was sadly going backwards through the field. Daniel was in, I think this is sort of around 5th place, locked in a rather large battle with all his fellow Audis. Yeah, Sebring is this version of Sebring is a very tricky track to overtake on. You've got the first corner, which is a very tight hairpin, a very, I say easy, but that's the prime overtaking spots. There we go. I will get my English right. You've got this corner up here. You can overtake around. It's a very tricky corner to. It's very tricky just to brake and get that corner braking point right. But you can overtake through there. The rest of the track, it is very much single file, unless you are incredibly brave, or the car in front makes a mistake, of course, because it is very tough to overtake. Because a lot of the corners don't have a huge amount of braking for them. This corner up here is a possibility if you get things right. As we can see, the Audi. It looks like it's a country squire. Sorry, it's a camouflage one. It's trying to blend in. It's trying to hide. Yeah, almost got it. You can also sort of overtake around this final corner if there is space, which there wasn't really there. A little bit of a bump, and then we come on to the start-finish straight. Now, I had warned everybody before we started that there was potential for the cars to roll over, although I did specifically pick tracks where they shouldn't. However, there was one curb here that was a little bit of a problem, as the Volvo, this was for 2nd place, I think. Fairly easy overtake for me there. Yeah, there is potential for the cars to roll over around here, although I was very careful with the tracks. Didn't realise there was a big old curb there that would flip these cars over, but the Volvo managed to get away with it this time. Daniel, though, wasn't to be so lucky, and the curb was to claim its first and only victim. I will say that only one person rolled, as Daniel was sort of racing with the Audis, took too much of the curb, and there we go. That is a broken Audi. That is now stuck on its side. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but there we go. That is the one curve you have to be careful with, and it was the same for everybody. Everybody has to avoid it, and you can get a little bit too greedy. I don't know what the camera's doing. The camera can't make up its mind what's going on. If you get a little bit too greedy on that curve, and you're going to end up rolling it. The field did end up kind of getting fairly spread out. This was the closest race of the lot between the Audi thing in disguise and a Volvo. They were battling over. This is for, can I remember now? This is for fourth, I think. The yellow Audi had gradually dropped back. Yeah, this disguised Audi was incredibly fast in a straight line. I think this was probably the quickest car of the lot in the straight line. The Volvos weren't. Well, it depends on how you build them. Again, there is a lot of. It's kind of interesting because there's lots of options. You can go for a very fast car in a straight line, which I presume is what this Audi is, and then you end up having to try and fight it around the corners. Or you can go for how my Volvo was, which is all the handling parts possible, and then a little bit of power. You're not going to have the straight line speed because you've got huge wing. You're going to have the drag. So you're going to be slow on the straights, but you're going to be very, very good through the corners. This Audi, though, seemed to have kind of got a fairly good balance. It didn't look a massive handful. It goes a little bit of rallycross there. Didn't look like a massive handful in the corners, but was incredibly fast in the straight. But was having problems getting past this Volvo because, yeah, it is hard to overtake around a lot of this track. A little bit of a nudge as they come out to the final corner. Now, your best bet is to sort of outbrake them into the first corner. However, the Volvo doesn't really give him much room and ends up going off onto the grass, so he's going to have to wait another lap to try that one. Which, yeah, it's a little bit of a shame because I think that Audi could have been a lot higher up the order if he hadn't got caught up behind the Volvo. The curb was to catch me out as well. I'd actually softened the suspension on my car deliberately to avoid it trying to stop it rolling. Even that hadn't worked really, as I got very close to rolling, and then someone had rescued Daniel's stricken car and made everything worse, and I had to take to the grass. That's the reason why we're not having a rescue car, or not specifically having a rescue car, because if a car ends up on its side, you rescuing it can cause a crash even worse. As you saw there, I was lucky. That's very lucky. That's a slow speed corner, and you have time to react. I was also rather heavily on the brakes because I was on two wheels. I was trying to get my car to kind of not fall over as well. So yeah, that's the reason why we're not having a rescue car, because they can cause as bigger crashes as they kind of save. So back towards, again, this is for fourth now, and the disguised Audi was still having trouble getting past the Volvo and wasn't getting a huge amount of room. There is some more contact. In all of their battling, they'd actually slowed each other down quite considerably, and the yellow Audi behind them had caught them up by quite a fair way. As you can see now, he was trying to get a better run through there, and again, not being given a huge amount of space from the Volvo. This corner, yeah, I really don't like this corner. I think lots of people were struggling with it. With this corner, it's a very, very nasty corner. By this time, this is getting towards the end of the race. You kind of just about figured out where the braking points were, as the cars behind still weren't giving each other very much room. Yeah, it's a very, very nice corner, very tricky corner to overtake on. You can go around the outside if you are very brave. The yellow Audi would have got that move worked if he'd been given enough room. But it's very, very tough going around the outside there. Our leader, though, had pretty much vanished at the start. I think he actually started alongside me, but managed to sort of avoid all the chaos early on and had got a decent lead. Although I had been catching him for the last couple of laps, and the Volvo that was behind me as well had been staying with me. So possibly, if there'd been a few more laps, it would have been a close finish. But as it was, the police car Audi took a rather easy victory. In the background, you could see me and the other Volvo in third. I believe it was the disguised Audi as well that came in fourth. So it was a very good first race. I mean, there was a little bit of chaos. There always is going to be. But it was fairly clean, which I was rather happy about. Race number 2, and we move on to Laguna Seca. This time there was a Mini. I don't think there was a Ford though. Again, it was dominated by the Audis. There were an awful lot of Audis in this one. The frame rate on the replay doesn't know quite what to do with all the chaos that's going on down there. This isn't my computer's fault. That's just the replay. A Volvo gets spun round, another Volvo ends up in the dirt. Yeah, it was really rather busy into that first corner. Despite starting mid sort of pack, I'd managed to sort of avoid most of the chaos and was stuck in this, or I should say stuck. I was involved in this lead group. It was a very chaotic start. Laguna Seca often causes chaotic starts because the first corner, you kind of go over a crest and then you sort of go down into the first corner. If you were further back on the grid, you don't really see much of what's going on because there's a great big hill. And there can be lots of crashes at the first. the first sort of lap. And again, there's another Volvo. The Volvos weren't having much luck in this one. I think there's 2 of them now that have been sent facing the wrong way in the opening lap. Yeah, Laguna Seca is... particularly with these cars, it seems to be very, very busy on this first lap. Laguna is one of the few tracks actually that I'd say is very, very good for overtaking. There's lots of corners that you can try and overtake, and everybody was trying to overtake everybody everywhere, and that caused a lot of problems. Anyways, we come towards the end of the first lap as an Audi's gone far too wide, and the Mini takes a little bit of a shortcut as well, and things were calming down. After if you can survive the first few corners, then things are going to be alright as the field starts to slowly kind of spread out. Also, interestingly, there are a number of different drivetrain options available. The Mini is always going to be front-wheel drive. However, the Volvos can be front, four-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. The Audis, I think, can be four-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. So, launching off the line, it is very interesting because you've got to be careful of the slow-starting front-wheel drives and the very fast-starting four-wheel drives. Anyway, my fellow Volvo, one that got spun out on the first lap, was making progress back up through the field. After recovering from his spin. A lot of the times, if you get spun around, you don't necessarily take very much damage. You're not going to go 3 wide into there. No, that's never going to work. If you just get... Oh, there's a crash in the background as well. If you just get tapped and spun around, you don't take a huge amount of damage. If you get spun around and then clattered into by somebody else, then that will probably break you. But yeah, if you just get a small tap and you spun around, you're not going to take a huge amount of damage. And you can recover fairly quickly, which is what was going on with this Volvo. There's a blue Volvo in there as well that I think had suffered some damage. I think, yeah, he's got a smoking engine going on there, which is never helpful, especially around a track like this where there's lots of hills. Having a damage engine any time is bad, but especially around here it seems. So this is back towards the front now. I think this is for 3rd and 4th, if I've remembered my positioning correctly. The field was now beginning to spread out. At the front anyway, there was some really big gaps appearing. I was leading from the Mini, who had managed to work his way up into 2nd. These 3 Audis were sort of close together, but they were soon to sort of fall apart. Yeah, this was a little bit of a weird one. The front lot were really very spread out early on, as an Audi rather outbrakes himself into the first corner, but can just about get away with it. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess we kind of got a bit lucky. We avoided the first lap sort of mess, as there normally is, and could kind of get away. As far as actual close racing goes, this sort of group were the best of the lot. This is sort of fairly low, well, I say fairly low, this is sort of mid. I think it's around 7th or 8th. I'm not really sure. There's about 5 Audis in shot. I also apologise, I think the replay has screwed up and not loaded a load of people's paint jobs, because there are a lot of blue Audis in this one. So, I don't know what's going on with it. So, yeah, I don't know. There could be just people who haven't painted their cars. But the fact that there's about 5 blue Audis in this one makes me think that some liveries haven't loaded. Anyways, we carry on focusing on this battle. This literally is the most interesting thing that was going on in this rail. The most interesting thing that I saw, anyway, between these lot. Yeah, it was a weird race, this one. It was fairly boring, actually, for me and for quite a lot of people, because there was just nobody around, really, as these guys here were sort of arguing over sort of the lower end of the top 10. The black Audi, sorry, I should say, is probably the quickest of this group here. He seems to be making his way through the field. However, you've always got to be careful, because once you're sort of in the lead of the group, if the car behind is anywhere near, you're going to have to drive defensively. As you can see here, the black Audi is having to drive defensively. And the problem is, as soon as you start driving defensively, you slow yourself down. So even if you have the slightly faster car, if you're having to defend on every corner or trying to take a defensive line every corner, you're going to have a real problem. You can see again through here, you can't really overtake through here, and without having to go defensive, the black car can kind of start to pull away a little bit. Up at the top of the corkscrew, again, this is a good track for overtaking. Like I said, there's loads of places that you can try overtaking maneuvers. The corkscrew is a good example. You can kind of overtake through there. You can fire your car up the inside as the white Audi. It's a little bit wide on the exit through there. Around these sections, you're not really going to get a pass done. As you see, again, I'm not sure what happened. I was trying to find some action going on elsewhere, and there really wasn't. At some point, the white Audi managed to make his way past, but it was short-lived. Managed to overtake, get a pass on the straight up there. That's quite impressive. But yeah, as far as overtaking goes, you will get a pass done into the corkscrew, although this one managed to get it done sort of before the corkscrew. Next couple of corners, you're unlikely to overtake unless there is a mistake. It is very rare to get past here. They're too fast, and there is a huge amount of braking. You might, if you're very lucky, get a pass on this next corner, but it's unlikely without a mistake. Final corner is another good corner for overtaking. There is a straight, but there's a very heavy braking zone coming down here. You've got to slow the car down a lot. So it's a very good place for overtaking. Then we come onto the start-finish road. The white car has got a better run onto the start line. and that's kind of important because the first corner is still your best bet really for overtaking. Although it is a little tricky to get this braking zone right as you come over the crest of the hill. You can't really see, and especially when you're that close to the car in front, very hard to get your braking zones right. Black Audi is driving very defensively, which is what you need to do, otherwise you're going to have a problem. But the white car cannot quite find his way past. Next couple of corners, you're not likely to overtake through here, really. I think the black car might have missed a gear there. There's a very slow getaway from that corner. You're not really going to overtake through the first part of there. You may, again, if you're very, very brave and the other driver is very experienced, you may get 2 cars wide, which they just about do through there. It's very scary trying to get 2 cars through there and not have a big crash because there's, again, not really a very big braking zone. This next corner is another good overtaking spot. There's a straight followed by a heavy braking zone. However, the white car is too far back and is now sort of lost a car length or two and is now going to struggle to make a pass anywhere else. At the front, it was just a fairly sort of spread out and boring race. I mean, I didn't have a huge lead. You can see in the background there was a Mini there that was keeping me fairly honest for the most part. But yeah, everybody was fairly spread out through the top sort of 6 and not much was going on. And the Volvo is actually, or my Volvo was very good, very good to drive. I was pretty pleased with how this car ended up. And it seemed to be fairly successful. You can't quite see the Mini. I can't see. I think he may have done a spin to finish, whatever. But yeah, there's massive gaps between everybody at the front. And this was the closest finish of the lot, really, or the closest finish that I could find anyway. In the end, the white car just couldn't quite find a way past. They had a very good race. It was, again, this race was fairly clean for the most part. There was a little bit of chaos on the first lap, but for the most part, it was fairly clean. And another fairly good race, which was surprising. I was expecting more chaos with all of these estate cars. Race 3, and we move on to the Nürburgring GP track. We are using the short version because these are only B-class cars and they're not exactly fast. And the long track around here is a pretty big lap. The first corner is always going to cause chaos here. You can see that I went for the tactic of stay out wide and try and avoid everything, and it worked on the most part. But don't everybody try that, otherwise there's going to be a big crash on the outside. I shouldn't have told you that. Oh, damn it. Yeah, by trying to sort of stay on the outside, I managed to avoid a lot of the chaos. The first corner here is always a problem because there's so many different lines you can take through it. And it sort of comes to a very sort of tight point at the apex. There's often incidences. Amazingly, we actually got through there fairly cleanly. I mean, there was a few bits of rubbing, and I suspect there's a few cars with damaged aero, but there wasn't any major crashes, which is always good, which is what I like to see. As far as overtaking goes around Nürburgring, this is a little bit of a tricky track. There's some crashing going on in the background. Nothing major went on there, don't worry. As far as overtaking goes, Nürburgring is a little bit trickier than Laguna Seca. There are a few good points. It's also helpful when the 2 cars in front of you take each other out. That's useful. I can get up. I can make 2 places up in the space of 1 corner. Yeah, that helps. So thank you very much for that. As far as car choice goes, there was rather a lot of Volvos in this one, which is unusual. There's also a Ford Country Boat, and there were a couple of Minis as well. They were having a good race. Yeah, the Volvos outnumbered the Audis this time around, I think, which surprised me. Although I was expecting it to be more like that anyway. The Ford though was doing fairly well. This is sort of around the 4th or 5th. No, this is 5th and 6th. There we go. I'm just trying to figure out. There's so much going on in this race. It was impossible to try and keep up with everything. Yeah, the Ford was doing very well this time, or the Ford that was racing. I think there's only 1 Ford in this race. Managed to get a move on the Mini, which is always tricky in that car. Even with this Ford, that seems to be a fairly well set up one, fairly controllable, you can just see it's all over the place compared to the likes of the Mini. The Mini is the smallest car here, so it should have that kind of to its advantage, although it is front-wheel drive and it cannot be changed, which isn't particularly helpful. In front of them there is a police car Audi that I think got taken out because of lag, which isn't helpful. Lag actually hadn't been a problem this race, or this session, until the final race. There was 1 car that was lagging all over the place. You can just see it there, the Irish car was causing problems sometimes. The Ford gets very sideways and everybody tries to go 3 wide through there. You know it's not going to work, and the Ford and the Mini eventually have a bit of a coming together, and I love how they come back on the track exactly how they left it, nose to tail. All that achieved was letting the Audi past. As far as straight line speed goes, the Mini was actually fairly impressive. It's keeping up with the Ford. Coming towards the hairpin, this chicane is utterly terrifying. It's very high speed, and the Mini gets very close to the wall through there. Yeah, it's an incredibly high speed corner, and it's very easy to get it wrong and go very fast into the wall. And you're unlikely to overtake through there, but you can do it. But it takes a very brave man to try and overtake there. further back, and there were some more Volvos. There were so many Volvos in this race, and it's one of the few times that it is okay to overtake a police car. And there's also a lot of police liveries on these cars. The Volvos and the Audis, I think, used in the British police. So yeah, a lot of people were running police liveries, so it looks rather interesting in the replays. A lot of police cars were being overtaken, and a few police cars won or came fairly high up. But yeah, there was some good battling further down the order. Although I think there were a few damaged cars from that first lap, so there wasn't major damage. No cars ended up on their roof, thankfully. I don't think any cars ended up on their roof except for Daniel. I will point out, actually, I forgot to say this earlier, Daniel had to go, so he didn't take part in the second or third races. Yay, so yeah, he hasn't turned up for many of these. Anyway, unlike a lot of the races, actually, normally when we do this, sort of people, if there's close racing, they end up breaking off into kind of pairs, and then everybody sort of organises themselves like that. In this race, it was a lot different. There was a massive group. This is for 6th and further back. You can see everybody was still very, very close together, which is unusual. Normally, it's because either sort of cars at different levels. So you've got some better tuned cars, some not quite as good tuned cars, maybe different driver skill levels, of course, is going to come into it. And also, there are often incidences when you have a big group of people together. Yeah, when you have sort of 5 or 6 cars all in a line, that's when it's most likely going to come to tears. However, these lot were being fairly well behaved. I mean, okay, they're not quite all nose to tail, but they're still in fairly close proximity for each other for this kind of racing. The Volvos were doing fairly well in this race. As you can see, as far as straight line speed goes, that red Volvo is pretty damn fast. But yeah, the Volvos were doing fairly well. The few Audis that there were right down the back of the grid. So I guess this track suits the Volvo. There is one Audi you can see there. I guess the track suits the Volvos a little bit better. Again, trying to kind of have an overtake into that chicane. Yeah, not going to work. And now you've messed your line up. And this is a better overtaking spot into the final corner. Get a good run through the chicane. And then you can think about overtaking into the final corner, which the blue Volvo does. In the background there's another Volvo's making a pass. Or I think that's an Audi. There's another Mini is about to join in the action. Of course, as you start battling with each other, you're going to slow each other down as you take odd lines, as you try and defend and all that sort of thing, which means the cars behind are going to start to catch up. As you can see here, the Mini, the red Mini, is starting to make some progress. Coming into the first corner, everybody takes different lines through there. I think someone cut the corner. Yes, I saw that. I saw you trying to cheat there in the background. There's lots of different lines you can take into that first corner, which makes overtaking and defending really quite tricky. Because we've also got these next few corners that you can line yourself up for an overtake. Although it is tricky through here, although it doesn't deter people from trying. As the blue Volvo tries to go around the outside, not going to work. Trying to do a cutback, and that might have worked, and indeed it has. So we've got a new car leading the train. Now the Mini's going to try and dive up the inside as we come in towards, I don't know, whatever corner. This is kind of a bit of a hairpin. There is a little bit of nudging from the red Volvo, who is now going to make up 2 places in one corner. Is he? No, not quite. Despite the fact that Mini's being front-wheel drive, it does have fairly good drive out of the corners. There is another Mini in the background that I think is alongside a Volvo. You're not going to go around the outside there. Probably, you nearly got away with it. There's now a race livery Volvo is joining in the action. There is a lot going on in this little group. So yeah, we'll keep going on here. On the straight, the race livery Volvo is incredibly quick. In a straight line, didn't quite have enough room there to really do that properly, and it pushed the Mini out a little bit wide. Yeah, that race Volvo is insanely fast in the straight line. Are we going to have the first overtake into the chicane? Yes, we are. Well done. It's very brave through there. However, you run a little bit wide and you've got a slow exit, allowing the Mini to go straight back past, and the race Volvo is up the inside as well. In the background, the blue Volvo is recovering now as well. There's many Volvos. There's lots of Volvos going on, and now everybody's going to try and go 5 wide down the straight. Yeah, that's not that's not going to work. This is probably the best racing I've seen in the entirety of the versus the community that we've done, or at least the best racing with a large group of cars. Coming towards the first corner, red Volvo is going to have a little look, maybe. Yeah, he's going to have a dive. Background, there's another Volvo having a dive. Eventually it sort of all comes to tears a little bit as the Mini loses out, gets kind of spun around a little bit. However, they're still going at the front. All the Volvos are together. Blue Volvo's trying to go around the outside. That's not really going to work. You got the red Mini. Is now going to have a look at the inside. No, can't quite get alongside. Yeah, there was some really very good racing in the middle of the pack. At the front, though, I had another boring race. It was very lonely in my Volvo for the most part. I pretty much just got to the front and drove away without any real challenge. There was an Audi, I believe, was in second, while amazingly a Ford Country Boat was in third. Somehow he managed to keep that all together, although it does help him when I think the rest of the cars were all in that massive group. So kind of a little bit of a respite, I think, for the Ford. The group, in the end, it kind of spread itself out a little bit on the final lap. I think there was a little bit of a coming together between some of the cars. I had a look at the damage. Pretty much all of these cars had a red aero, or they had a lot of damage to the aero. Not much engine damage. All the crashes between this lot was just sort of panel rubbing. There wasn't major collisions, really. In the end, the blue Mini was the... actually, no, he managed to make up some places on the final lap. I didn't see that. Amazingly, yeah, the blue Mini did manage to make up some places there. But yeah, there was some really good racing in that final race. In fact, there's really good racing all round, which is surprising considering what we were racing. There are some massive estate cars that weren't really meant for racing. Well, the Volvo did kind of race in touring cars, but that was a highly modified version. But yeah. And some really good racing. There wasn't anywhere near as much chaos as I was expecting in this one, which is always good. Now, next week's Fail Race versus the community, or I should say this week's, because we race on a Thursday, and it's, yeah, I'm going to get myself confused. Next week's, whichever week's Fail Race versus the community is going to be an interesting one. I'm a little bit nervous about doing this, but I think it could be good fun. It's going to be muscle cars versus tuner cars. They are going to be A-class. You can upgrade them to A-class. For the purpose of this, I'm going to allow the Corvettes and the Vipers to race as muscle cars, although I don't think many of them will be raced because they are already fairly high A-class, which means you won't be able to do that many upgrades to them. You won't be able to do all the race suspension, race brakes, tyres, weight reduction, so they're going to be a real handful. So you can race them, but I don't think many people will because they're going to probably be too difficult to drive. Now, as far as cars go, I can't give you a full list, primarily because there are millions of options and there are many choices. So when you go to sign up in the forums, I'll put links in the description. That's where you go to sign up, by the way. If your car isn't going to be allowed, then I will say in the forum. So if you post up with what car you want to use, I will have a look through there. And if your car isn't allowed, I will reply to that post. Although, if you're sensible, I'm sure it will be allowed to be in. So yes, that is it for this video. Next week's one, I forgot to say, will be on Thursday, the 15th of August, 7 PM, British summer time, for whatever that might be elsewhere, because I can only really do these on Thursday because I do other things at weekends. So sorry, that's just how it works. It's just the best time for me. I will try at some point to organise one at a weekend at a later time for the Americans and the Australians, because I know it's hard for you to get on at that time. I can't really do much about it. I'm sorry. I hate the time zones. But there we go. Yeah, and if you do want to sign up, I'll put a link in the description. Go to our forums, find the correct section. They're not very hard to find, and you can sign up in there. However, that is it for this video, guys. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.